Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today, and we're finally getting into gaming news that has nothing to do with Activision, Blizzard, and the deal with Xbox. Hooray! Today, we're getting into Bethesda. We're going to talk about Starfield, not only on the PC front, but the AMD marketing deal that's clearly in play for PC gamers, and what that could mean for the handheld side of things, but also just what does Starfield need to run on your computer. We're going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about Starfield from a more businessy angle based off some interesting information that was revealed from an FTC court document from about a week ago. And we're also going to get into Arkane Austin, where we have some small details on their next game, more so what type of game they're making. And I think that's really important, given, if you didn't remember, Arkane Austin is not only the developer of Prey, we love Prey, but Redfall. And so you may want to know, have they learned their lesson yet? Or how many times we got to teach you this lesson, old man? Are they going back to live service and multiplayer? Well, we'll talk about that. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are new here and you're into Bethesda news, information, all that fun stuff, please do consider subscribing. Let's begin with Starfield's PC specs. So the image you're seeing on screen right now is from AMD's website. And you'll see here it's defined as a heroic experience, an epic experience, and a legendary experience, being 1080p, 1440, and 4K. And you'll see a variety of requirements from all AMD hardware, their CPU, their GPU, their motherboards. And it's looking like for most Intel and NVIDIA users that the 1440p range will be feasible, but 4K 60 for Starfield is going to be mighty demanding. Now, I will fully admit, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm a bit of an Intel NVIDIA snob. And I don't think that's for any wrong reason, just, you know, when I'm building my PC, I'm picking out my parts. I go fully pre-built, by the way, if you want to know how casual I am about this. I'm not about to try to punch above my pay grade here and act like I know what I'm talking about top to bottom with PC specs. But yeah, I always like a little Intel. I always like a little NVIDIA. I think it's because with NVIDIA, the ease of updating drivers. I remember I had a AMD Radeon, some type of graphics card in 2012. And updating the drivers for that was a pain in my butt as a new PC gamer, and NVIDIA made my life a million times easier. So I think it's just, you know, I've grown up with NVIDIA, right? So here over on Steam, we have for Intel NVIDIA snobs like myself, the PC specs that I wanted to go over. So you'll have the minimum and recommended requirements here on screen. For both sides of the spectrum, you're going to need 16 gigabytes of RAM, but for the processing speeds, you'll see that's the more intense part for Starfield, which would make sense. We'll talk about why in a moment. AMD Ryzen 5 2600X and Intel Core i7-6800K for the processing on minimum. Meanwhile, on recommended, you'll probably want to have AMD Ryzen 5 3600X or an Intel i5 10600K. Meanwhile, on the graphics front, a little bit less demanding in the scheme of things, as for the minimum requirements, an AMD Radeon RX 5700 and an NVIDIA GeForce 1070 Ti. Meanwhile, for recommended, you have a AMD Radeon RX 6800 XT and an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2080. You're going to need an SSD for this game no matter what, and if you watch my videos, you already knew about the storage space, but 125 gigabytes for installing. So that's a pretty big game there, but with AMD being at the forefront of the marketing, that was the first, I'd say, dosage of controversy Starfield faced, which when you compare it to something like Fallout 76, I'm sure Bethesda's like, hooray, that's your problem? Great. Which I certainly don't blame them. A lot of people are very anti-AMD because they will buy out the rights for pretty much upscaling tech and just make people use FSR, and so modders have to go in and activate DLSS. But with that being said, NVIDIA's even at the forefront of saying, here are the PC specs for Starfield, because there was a video online where Todd Howard announced AMD is the PC partner for Starfield. And what I think this means is, for those who don't know, the AMD chipset is what's fully packed into the Asus ROG Ally. My main takeaway from seeing stuff like this is we got to be days, weeks away from hearing about how Starfield can run on the Asus ROG Ally. There's no doubt in my mind, it's just a matter of when. I don't know if that means yay or nay on Steam Deck, but as an owner of the ROG Ally, full disclosure, I'm going to be doing a sponsored video for it. I have been super impressed with the chipset in there and just how powerful it is. Battery life, but man, dude, it is a super impressive piece of hardware. I was playing like Mass Effect Legendary Edition, running it 1080, 60, vibrant colors. I mean, I was going all out with this thing, man. So I feel like that would be a big kind of chest pound moment for AMD that they're clearly looking for here as they're trying to buy out the competition effectively. And I think this, again, just seems to me another sign that Starfield will be on the ROG Ally. It would just be a great selling point for that device, which is obviously competing head-to-head with the Steam Deck. So let's take a break from Starfield. We still have more conversation to have on that, on the more businessy front, but that's what's going on PC. Let's talk a bit about Arkane Austin. So back in May, they dropped Redfall. Yeah, we know how that all went. I don't need to beat a dead horse here. So a lot of people have been wondering, all right, well, what's their next game? Now, there was this interview with Matt Booty, which indicated that, like, right now they're safe, effectively. And I don't want Arkane Austin to be shut down at all, but it wasn't really a affirmative statement that, you know, hey, Arkane Austin's going to be okay forever, which, I mean, what business really is, but I digress. A lot of people want to know what's next. And so we have this job listing here over on ZeniMax's official website for what you're seeing now is a lead technical engineer at Arkane Studios Austin, which again is where Prey and Redfall were made. And the most important detail here that you'll have to see is under the preferred skills for the person they're trying to hire, they say that you need a familiarity with single-player action RPGs and immersive sims. Obviously, there is no direct confirmation now of what the game will be and if it's actually going to end up being fully single-player, because for example, Redfall, as we learned in multiple reports, started off as a live service game and they stripped all of that out to the best of their ability. And so it was this multiplayer co-op focused game that you could also play in single player. So keep that type of nuance in mind as we go along here. But I'm going to talk about it as if it's going to be what's listed here, a single player game from Arcane. This is the best thing for them. I understand that Redfall was what I would call creatively contaminated, as in from the get-go, this was probably a borked project, given that it was coming from the initiative of Bethesda, trying to get live service and money printing effectively going throughout all of their major studios, right? You had Wolfenstein, Youngblood, Fallout 76, Redfall, etc., etc. This was that era of Bethesda, and this should be the final piece of all of that. I think because of Prey, and because of Xbox's admitted failure on supporting Redfall during its development, while I know a lot of people are anti-Arkane Austin, I think they deserve a shot. I think they absolutely deserve a shot to make a single-player game with proper Xbox support and show people what they're made of. Here's the big problem with all of this that does have me worried. Some people will see at face value, oh, great, like single-player Arcane, yes! Hold the phone. There was that report from Bloomberg that said that about 75% of the original staff that worked on Prey and transitioned over to Redfall left the studio. So it's not like we had a bunch of burdened down workers who were forced to go from the immersive sim single player experience that they're known for and start working on multiplayer games, and they stayed there the whole time. Many of them left. Many of the minds that made Prey are gone. And so this doesn't necessarily guarantee the quality bar goes from here to here. It doesn't guarantee that, unfortunately. It's never a guarantee, of course, in game development, but there are certain people and talents that help affirm a level of quality could be ensured at least. However, when it comes to Arkane Austin, a lot of that talent was lost, but as they're hiring, they're now trying to get what they were already known for. Another thing that was in that Bloomberg report was that people were trying to join Arkane Austin, like, hey, I want to work on things like Dishonored and Prey, and they're like, we're working on Redfall. Oh, you are? I'm going to go apply over here instead, because obviously people who are joining want to work on a specific type of game that may have even inspired them to get into the industry in the first place. So yeah, it looks like they're working on a single-player action RPG. My prediction is we won't hear from Arkane Austin for a long while. I think that's the smartest thing they can do. They're going to do the 60 FPS patch for Redfall whenever that drops, and they're going to skedaddle from that game ASAP. I think they'll finish out the support for the season pass with the 2 new characters, but I think they're all in on their next game already, and they want to put this behind them as quickly as possible. And also, I think Harvey Smith, the guy who was really behind this game too, and was behind the likes of Deus Ex, as well as Dishonored, like an immersive sim mastermind, definitely deserves another chance too with proper Microsoft support to show what they're capable of, because I was complaining about Redfall from the start. I softened up on it. Hindsight 2020, I probably never should have, because I was like, why am I not trusting Arcane to deliver here? Of course, again, hindsight 2020. But, you know, Harvey Smith in his bag, like, I just recommend to people, play Dishonored, play Prey. You'll see what I mean. You'll see why people were so feeling betrayed after Redfall. But I digress. That's what's next for Arkane Austin, presumably. We won't know until there's an official confirmation. I think the next Arcane game will be from Leon. I think it's going to be a Deathloop sequel of some kind. And I'm keen on what that will be, because I was underwhelmed with Deathloop's options in the terms of approach and level design. And hopefully now, a little bit deeper into this generation, we can get something pretty rad from them. All right, now let's move on over to Starfield to wrap things up. It's an Xbox exclusive. So is Indiana Jones. And this kind of gives us an idea of how much Xbox thinks they are sacrificing by taking these games, plucking them off of PlayStation and putting them into the Xbox ecosystem with Day One Game Pass, and how they actually think they can make it up. So let's read a little bit here from a headline of IGN and then an excerpt from an FTC document. So the headline reads, Xbox thinks Game Pass can help offset tens of millions in lost Starfield and Indiana Jones sales. Here's the exact excerpt where it says, Microsoft Gaming CFO Tim Stewart testified that when Microsoft evaluated exclusivity of ZeniMax games in December 2020, despite having more than 10 million units forecasted for both Starfield and Indiana Jones on PlayStation, Microsoft believed it could offset losses incurred from taking ZeniMax games exclusive through upside to Game Pass and increased console sales. Mr. Stewart testified that Microsoft needed fewer dollars in the short term to make up for the financial impact of exclusivity of ZeniMax games on Microsoft. To me, the big surprise here, we'll talk about Starfield, of course, but the big surprise is that they think Indiana Jones is would have sold on PlayStation alone 10 plus million copies. Games are lucky on a multi-platform level to sell 10 plus million copies, and I hope Indiana Jones does sell 10 plus million copies in general. I know they're not putting it on PlayStation now, and they're saying like that's probably not going to happen, but I hope it does sell millions and millions, and it's Machine Game's most successful title, because I know they've always made, outside of Youngblood, banger games that just haven't sold extremely well. I know New Order did sell pretty well, but otherwise there have been diminishing returns for them. So I really hope they do have a banger here with Indiana Jones. But I wonder if after the movie and just how much people have cooled off on Indiana Jones, like there's still that love there. Will a game sell millions of units? Because I think of this almost like a Guardians of the Galaxy situation where it's like sexy on paper, but then you put it out there and people are like, Marvel again. All right, even though the game is great. Marvel again. And it doesn't sell as well as it should have, even though it's a phenomenal game. I hope that Indiana Jones does well. Starfield having more than 10 million lost sales makes a ton of sense. When you look at the numbers that they put out there for Skyrim, tens and tens and tens of millions of sales, you have to remember this is probably a forecast of a lifetime of sales. Like, what is our bar over X amount of years here? In Starfield, it makes a ton of sense because of console modding, DLC. If it was packaged in with the PlayStation 5, like maybe in some type of offer, they did the math on all this and said, it's better for us to put this exclusively on our console to sell more systems and to sell more Game Pass subscriptions, and we will make up that money through that. So the bean counters did bean counter things and said, yep, that's how we're going to make the money back. I find that personally fascinating because it's really the first time in writing we've seen them say, like, we're going to take this figure, which none of us know what that figure is, of what they want to hit for Game Pass monthly down the line. And as long as we're hitting that, it can fuel all of this first-party studio stuff they're doing, where they're making things like Hellblade, they're making things like Avowed, and so on and so forth, and Starfield, where they're reaching for some number and they're trying to make calculated decisions. And this is important to pay attention to because this is likely how they gauge all the games in the Bethesda library, and when they get Activision, how they're going to gauge all of those. So while it's number nerdy stuff, I still thought it was worth talking about with Starfield in tow on what Xbox is seeing as a potential gain here by not putting it on PlayStation. So I just want to share all that with you. That is today's Bethesda news update. I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on it in the comments down below. So please do fire away, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what's on your mind. Other than that, take fantastic care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the hell out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.